There are stories that inspire us, and then there are stories that warn us. This is a story about faith, power, and the quiet ways integrity can erode when no one is looking. It's the story of a respected pastor in Bee Cave, Texas, whose life appeared blessed beyond measure until the truth surfaced. But more importantly, it's the story of the family who survived the storm and found healing on the other side. Our daughters, 12-year-old Mia and 9-year-old Peyton, were the light of our lives. They grew up in the heart of the church. Greater Ebenezer wasn't just where we worshiped. It was home. Mia was our quiet thinker, wise beyond her years. She loved books, loved music, and had the sweetest, most tender heart. She was the kind of child who noticed when someone was hurting. She would make little cards for sick members of the church, drawing hearts and writing scriptures in her careful handwriting. She sang in the youth choir every second Sunday. Her voice was soft but beautiful. Whenever she sang, Daniel would smile proudly from the front pew like no one else was in the room. Peyton was our spark, loud, funny, fearless. She had a laugh that could fill an entire hallway. She danced more than she walked and always found a way to make everyone smile. Peyton loved church because to her, it was fun. She loved Vacation Bible School, loved church picnics, loved running through fellowship hall in her little dresses and shiny shoes. She was the one always volunteering for Christmas plays and Easter speeches. Never shy, never afraid of the microphone. The church loved our girls. The older women called them little angels. The deacons spoiled them with candy after service. The ushers fussed over how beautiful they looked every Sunday. They were surrounded by people who watched them grow. Every Sunday morning was a routine. I'd curl their hair, lay out matching dresses. Mia would carefully hold her Bible close to her chest. Peyton would twirl in front of the mirror and ask if she looked pretty. Daniel would pray over us before we left for church. Church wasn't just religion to them. It was love, it was safety, it was happiness. And as their mother, watching them grow in that environment made me proud. I believed we were building something beautiful. I believed we were raising daughters rooted in faith, kindness, and truth. I believed they were safe, and perhaps that's what hurts the most, knowing innocence lived so brightly there, before darkness found its way in. As the church grew, so did our lifestyle. Every packed Sunday service, every revival, every conference, every donation, it all added up. And before long, the sacrifices we made in those early years seemed to be paying off. Daniel wanted the world to see it. So we bought a sprawling estate tucked away in the rolling hills of the Texas Hill Country, just outside Austin. 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, 3 acres of manicured land. A winding private driveway lined with oak trees, stone columns, iron gates, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the hills. At sunset, the sky painted the landscape in shades of orange and gold. People would pull up and gasp. It looked like something out of a magazine. Inside, the house was immaculate. Imported marble floors, custom lighting, designer furniture, a chef's kitchen with double islands, a movie room, a wine cellar Daniel called for guests, though we rarely entertained there, an infinity pool in the back, a covered patio with an outdoor kitchen. Everything expensive, everything polished, everything perfect. And the cars. Lord, the cars. A black Cadillac Escalade with every feature imaginable. A white Mercedes-Benz S-Class Daniel called his business car. A sleek Porsche Panamera he bought just because. And my car, a luxury SUV I barely drove. Daniel loved it. Loved to pull up to church in style. Loved the whispers. Loved the admiration. Loved when people looked at us and saw blessed. He would smile and say, "This is the fruit of our labor." And maybe part of me believed that too. I thanked God for every blessing. I truly did. But if I'm honest, none of it mattered to me. I would have been just as happy in a modest home in Austin. A cozy kitchen, a smaller yard, a house filled with laughter instead of silence, because despite all the beauty, our house didn't feel warm. It felt like a showroom. Daniel insisted on muted tones: gray, cream, black, white. Everything sterile, everything controlled, no bright colors, no clutter, no personality. No signs that children actually lived there. No family photos on counters. No colorful pillows. No little keepsakes from church members. No trinkets. No, Tacky decorations, as Daniel called them. He hated what he called mess. He hated anything out of place. And if something was, there was hell to pay. A crooked picture frame, a shoe left by the door, a cup on the kitchen island, one toy forgotten in the living room. He'd notice immediately. His face would tighten, his jaw would clench, and the atmosphere in the house would shift. Everyone felt it. The girls would freeze. I'd rush to fix whatever offended him before his temper rose. The televisions were hidden in walls. With one click, artwork would slide aside to reveal massive screens. Even entertainment had to remain invisible. Everything in our home had to maintain the illusion of perfection. The biggest mystery in the house was Daniel's office. It sat on the first floor at the end of a long hallway. Dark wood door. Fingerprint lock, always locked. No one was allowed inside. Not me, not the girls, not the housekeeper, not anyone. Daniel was adamant. "Stay out of my office." His voice would harden any time we came too close. At first, I respected it. I told myself he needed privacy, a place to pray, to prepare sermons, to work. But over time, it became unsettling. He wouldn't allow me to clean it, wouldn't let me vacuum, wouldn't let me dust, wouldn't even let me step inside to leave his coffee. Sometimes late at night, I'd see light under the door. I'd hear the click of keys on his laptop. Muffled voices, sometimes laughter, sometimes silence so heavy it felt wrong. I asked questions. He shut them down. "It's church business. You wouldn't understand." Stop snooping. And eventually, I stopped asking. But deep down, I knew. That locked office didn't just hold sermons and paperwork. It held secrets. Secrets that would one day destroy everything. Family dinners were once filled with laughter. Vacations were sometimes simple but always meaningful. From every angle, we looked like a family grounded in love. But sometimes, the more perfect a life appears, the harder it is to notice when small changes begin. The slow drift. It didn't happen overnight. The changes were subtle. A missed family dinner here, a private meeting that ran late there. The abuse started with violent grabs, and an apology later. Success brought attention. Attention fed ego, and ego began to cloud judgment. The warmth that once defined Daniel and I's marriage felt replaced by tension, anger, silence, and fear. The girls felt it too. The warm dad they once knew was now replaced by a stranger with their father's face. I kept praying for God to deliver Daniel from the demon that had a hold on him. But like many families, I told myself things would settle down, that stress was temporary, that the man I loved was still the same at his core. I had no clue how wrong I was at the time. Daniel had started making choices he once would have condemned, small compromises he justified to himself as harmless. He had begun to see church success as proof he is chosen or above criticism. As Greater Ebenezer grew, so did the attention Daniel received. At first, it seemed harmless. Admiring glances, lingering smiles, women who suddenly found reasons to speak with him after every sermon. They praised his preaching, his suits, his voice, his anointing. Some of the women became bold. They arrived early every Sunday morning just to secure seats in the front rows, not because they wanted a better word, but because they wanted to be seen. They sat directly in his line of vision, crossing and uncrossing their legs, smiling too long, staring too hard, watching him the way hungry people watch a feast. I noticed. Everyone noticed, but no one said anything, because he was the pastor, and because women like that knew how to hide in plain sight. After service, they would line up to speak to him. Most asked for prayer. Some asked for guidance. Others leaned in too close, whispering in his ear, laughing softly, touching his arm just a little too long. Daniel should have shut it down. He should have set boundaries. He should have remembered who he was. But Daniel liked the attention. He liked feeling wanted, desired, admired. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself he was strong enough to resist. Until one day, he wasn't. Daniel would justify it in his mind. "I'm just a man. God knows my heart. I work hard. I deserve peace." That's how sin begins sometimes, not in action, but in permission. Then came the counseling sessions, private meetings in his office, closed doors, soft voices, long prayers. He'd tell himself he was helping hurting women. He'd place his hand on theirs. Tell them God loved them. Tell them they were beautiful in his eyes. Tell them they were chosen, special, seen. The lines blurred quickly. Prayer turned into emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy turned into secrets. Secrets turned into affairs. Daniel didn't just fall once. He fell repeatedly. There were at least 3 women in the church he became intimately involved with. 3 women who trusted him spiritually and gave themselves to him emotionally. One had recently given birth to a baby boy, Daniel's son. Another sat in the congregation every Sunday, 6 months pregnant with what would become his 4th child. And still, he kept preaching, kept shouting, kept laying hands on people, kept pretending. But none of them compared to Keisha. Keisha Monroe. Keisha Monroe was different. She wasn't just another affair. She became his addiction, his escape, his obsession. In the beginning, Daniel wanted to spend every spare moment with her. She made him feel powerful, young, alive, wanted in ways he had never experienced before. Keisha studied him, learned him, knew exactly what to say when he was stressed, knew exactly how to soothe his ego. She praised him constantly, called him king, called him chosen, called him a man any woman would be lucky to have. She never challenged him, never corrected him, never asked hard questions. She only fed the parts of him already growing out of control. And Daniel mistook indulgence for love. He told himself Keisha understood him, that she gave him peace. She made him feel alive. But what she really did was pull him deeper into darkness. Soon, he was sneaking away to hotels, taking ministry trips that weren't ministry, using church money to fund secret meetings, buying gifts, paying bills, living 2 lives, one at the pulpit, one in private. And each lie made the next lie easier. Each betrayal made his heart colder. Each secret pushed him further from God, further from me, and further from the man he once was. The sanctuary had become a stage, and Daniel Reed was performing. Keisha had a different agenda. She wanted Daniel, but she wanted to take the spot as First Lady of Greater Ebenezer Baptist Church. She felt she was a better fit for the church and Daniel. Keisha hated Angela. She was always stressing her man out. Daniel confided in Keisha. He would tell her how Angela was a prude. He needed more. She didn't know how to take care of a man like Daniel. She knew not to stress him out, and she provided him with what he needed in bed and out. Keisha was not like the other women Daniel had encountered. She was patient, calculated, observant. She had watched Daniel Reed for years from the 3rd row on the left side of Greater Ebenezer CME Church. She knew exactly when he smiled the widest, when he looked exhausted, when his shoulders sagged after service. Keisha didn't just admire Daniel. She studied him. Where other women saw a powerful pastor, Keisha saw opportunity. She saw the custom suits, the luxury car, the influence. She saw the church packed every Sunday, the respect he commanded when he stepped into a room. And more than anything, she saw Angela Reed, graceful, reserved, quiet. Keisha couldn't stand her. In Keisha's mind, Angela didn't appreciate what she had. She thought Angela was cold, too proper, too controlled. Keisha would watch Angela move through church events with dignity and calm, and all she could see was weakness. "She doesn't know how to keep a man like that," Keisha whispered once to herself. To Keisha, Angela looked tired, worn down. And Keisha believed she could do better. She imagined herself beside Daniel, standing in designer dresses beside the pulpit, leading women's ministry, shaking hands, smiling for cameras. First Lady Keisha Reed. The thought thrilled her, so she began her work. Not obvious at first. A compliment here, a lingering touch on his arm there. A plate of food prepared just the way Pastor likes it. Little things, subtle things. She made herself visible. And Daniel noticed. At first he resisted, or at least, he told himself he did. But Daniel was already vulnerable, already drifting, already starving for validation he refused to admit he needed. Keisha knew exactly how to feed it. She listened when Angela questioned him. She praised him when church board members challenged him. She called him anointed when he doubted himself. She became his safe place, or at least the illusion of one. Daniel started confiding in her. At first it was innocent. Church stress, financial pressure, leadership burdens. But soon, it became personal. "Angela doesn't understand me," Daniel said one night as Keisha sat across from him in his office. Keisha tilted her head sympathetically. "She tries, but she just doesn't know what I carry." Keisha reached for his hand. "A strong man like you needs peace, Daniel." The sound of his first name on her lips made him pause. Daniel sighed deeply. "She's always complaining," he muttered. "Always questioning me. Always too tired. Too distant." Keisha's eyes softened, though inside she smiled. "She should be grateful," Keisha whispered. Daniel looked at her. "She doesn't know how to take care of a man like you." Those words hit Daniel somewhere dangerous. Deep. Pride mixed with hunger. Keisha kept going. "You need someone who knows how to protect your peace. Someone who sees your greatness. Someone who gives without making you beg for it." Daniel leaned back in his chair. He knew this conversation was wrong. He knew the boundaries had already begun to blur. But instead of pulling away, he leaned in. And Keisha gave him exactly what Angela never would. Not love, not truth, but permission. Permission to feel justified. Permission to betray. Permission to drift further from the man he once was. She fed his ego. Act 5, the destruction. Fed his desires. Fed his delusions. And every time Daniel walked back into his home, Angela could feel it. The distance. The silence. The unfamiliar coldness in his eyes. She didn't know Keisha's name yet. But she could feel another woman's presence in the cracks of her marriage. And Keisha? She was patient, because in her mind, Angela's time was almost up. Daniel was in love with Keisha. She was young, beautiful, and had a perfect body. She catered to his every whim. She was in cosmetology school. She wore long nails and popped her gum and her lips when she talked. He could deal with that. She was a little rough around the edges, but he loved how she made him feel. Behind the expensive walls, behind the polished floors, behind the picture-perfect image, our home had become a prison. Daniel's anger had changed. In the beginning, it was frustration, sharp words, a slammed door, cold silence for days. But over time, his anger became something darker, something unpredictable, something dangerous. At first, it was the tone in his voice, the way he snapped when I asked simple questions. "Where were you? Why are you late? Did you forget to sign the school form?" Questions any wife would ask. Questions that once would have been normal, now felt like stepping on a landmine. I learned quickly to measure every word, to study his mood when he walked through the door, to watch his face, his eyes, his shoulders, to know when to speak, and when silence was safer. Because I remembered. I remembered the slap that came so suddenly my ears rang. I remembered the sting on my cheek, the taste of blood in my mouth. I remembered the night I gently pointed out an error in one of the church finances he was reviewing. I wasn't accusing him. I was helping. Or so I thought. He stood up so fast his chair flew backward, his face twisted in rage. Before I could speak, his hand struck me. Hard. I hit the floor. The girl screamed upstairs. He stood over me, breathing hard, his voice low and cold. "Don't ever correct me again." I believed him. After that, the abuse came more often. Sometimes it was a shove, sometimes grabbing my arm so tightly it bruised, sometimes throwing things, punching walls inches from my face, and sometimes, worse, the kind of violence that leaves no easy words, the kind of violence a wife should never fear from her husband. Daniel had become cruel, controlling, cold. He no longer saw me as his partner, only as something to control, something to silence. He hadn't shown me tenderness in months, no affection, no warmth, no love. He slept beside me like I wasn't there. And on the rare nights I reached for him, hoping to reconnect, he'd jerk away, push my hand aside, turn his back. After a while, I stopped trying. I stopped asking. I stopped hoping. But there were nights when his distance turned into something terrifying. He would come into the room angry, restless, demanding. And I knew resistance only made things worse. There were times I begged him to stop, times I cried, times I pleaded. But mercy no longer lived in him. One night, I found the courage to say no. Just once. I thought maybe somewhere inside him, The man I married still existed. But instead, his fist came so fast I didn't see it. Pain exploded across my face. I hit the floor. Everything blurred. I remember holding my jaw, thinking it was broken. I remember blood. I remember the room spinning. And I remember him standing over me, breathing hard, with no apology in his eyes. Only anger. Only contempt. The next morning, I covered the swelling with makeup. I wore a scarf. I smiled at church, and no one asked questions. Or maybe they were too afraid to. The girls heard more than I realized. At night, through the walls, they heard me cry, they heard arguments, the crashes, the silence after. Mia and Peyton would sit in their room together, holding each other, crying quietly so he wouldn't hear. Children should never know fear like that. They started changing. Mia became quieter, withdrawn, always watching. Peyton stopped laughing as much, stopped dancing, stopped being the bright little light she used to be. Our home was full of expensive things, luxury, beauty, perfection. But underneath it all, we were living in fear, and I was losing myself. Day by day, bruise by bruise, silence by silence. I kept praying, asking God to fix him, to soften him, to bring my husband back. But heaven felt silent, and Daniel Reed, the beloved pastor, the powerful preacher, the man everyone called blessed, was becoming the very thing I feared most. Daniel Reed had become a stranger to himself, the pastor by day, the predator by night. Weekend nights had become routine, a ritual, a dark escape. He would leave the house long after midnight, the girls asleep, me lying awake in silence, pretending not to hear the garage door open, pretending not to know. He'd slide behind the wheel of his black Cadillac Escalade, the leather seats cold beneath him, the city lights reflecting across the windshield. He'd turn the music up loud, hard bass, trap beats pounding through the speakers, the kind of music that fed the chaos already brewing inside him. One hand on the wheel, the other feeding his growing addiction. A quick line, a deep breath, another hit of powder to numb whatever conscience he had left, to fuel the rage, to silence the guilt, to awaken the darker parts of him. His favorite destination sat on the rougher side of Austin, the streets near Rundberg Lane, a place alive after midnight, neon lights flickering, cheap motels, liquor stores glowing in the dark, people lingering on corners, deals whispered through half-open windows. A world far from Sunday morning sermons, far from stained glass windows and shouting, "Amen!" Out there, Daniel wasn't Pastor Reed. Out there, he was just another man chasing his appetites. And the women knew him. They recognized the Escalade, recognized the tinted windows, recognized the money. As soon as he rolled slow down the street, heads turned, women approached. Some bold, some desperate, some laughing, some fighting for his attention. They knew he paid well. Daniel enjoyed the power of it, the choosing, the control, the feeling of being wanted without questions, without responsibility, without consequences. He'd lower the window, survey them like merchandise, point. You. Sometimes two, sometimes more. The women climbed in, perfume and smoke filling the air, laughter, negotiation, promises. Daniel didn't care about names, didn't care about stories, didn't care about the pain in their eyes. He only cared about feeding the beast inside him. The anger, the hunger, the emptiness he could never seem to fill. He'd pull into some rundown roadside motel, the kind with buzzing vacancy signs and stained curtains. Cash on the counter, no questions asked. Hours disappeared behind locked doors. Minutes blurred into smoke, sweat, and bad decisions. Whatever happened inside those rooms left pieces of him behind every time. But he didn't care. Not then. Satisfaction was all that mattered. Temporary relief. Temporary silence. Temporary escape. One night, one of the women laughed and asked, "How long you want us for, Rev?" The nickname made him grin, made him feel untouchable. He leaned back, eyes glassy. "I answer to no one." He laughed, a dark, reckless laugh. "Hell, all night." The women laughed with him. Daniel tossed more cash onto the bed. "I'll go home whenever I'm ready." And for those few hours, he believed it. Believed he was free. Believed he was in control. But every night he drove back home, just before sunrise, The emptiness came with him. The drugs wore off, the music stopped, the silence returned, and the man staring back in the mirror looked less and less like a pastor, and more like a man racing toward destruction. The sun had barely risen over the hills when Daniel turned into the long driveway. The black Cadillac Escalade rolled slowly past the iron gates and up toward the house. Inside the car, the music was finally off. The silence was sharp. His jaw clenched. His eyes were bloodshot. The high had started to wear off. His body was exhausted. His mood was foul. He gripped the steering wheel and exhaled hard. He wasn't thinking about God. Wasn't thinking about church. Wasn't thinking about the sermon he was supposed to preach in a few hours. He was thinking about comfort and obedience. As he sat in the driveway for a moment, staring at the front of the house, his thoughts turned bitter. Angela better not start this morning. He rubbed his face. I don't have patience for her questions, her whining, her mistakes. His mouth tightened. And those girls. He shook his head. Mia always looking scared. Peyton always talking too much. Spoiled. Needy. Always wanting something. His irritation rose with every thought. They better be quiet this morning. They better be on their best behavior. He had no room for noise, no room for emotion, no room for anything that challenged his comfort. He wanted one thing: a hot shower, a hot breakfast. Silence. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard. He was supposed to be at church by 11. Deacon Otis called a mandatory leadership meeting. He scoffed. He'd get there when he got there. Who was going to question him? He was Pastor Daniel Reed. He stepped out of the SUV and slammed the door, straightened his jacket, adjusted his watch, took a deep breath, then walked through the garage door. And just like that, the peace in the house disappeared. I felt it before I saw him, like a storm cloud rolling in. Heavy, dark, oppressive. The air changed. The girls felt it too. Mia looked up from the kitchen table. Peyton stopped laughing mid-sentence. The silence was immediate. Daniel walked in smelling like cheap perfume, stale smoke, and betrayal. His face was hard, his eyes cold. I didn't ask questions. I had learned better. I already knew he expected breakfast. He always did. A full breakfast. An omelet made the way he liked it. Cheese, peppers, onions folded perfectly. Toast with butter. Turkey bacon crisp. Fresh squeezed orange juice. Hot coffee waiting. I stood at the stove, forcing my voice to stay light. Good morning, honey. He barely looked at me, grunted something under his breath, then headed upstairs to shower. No kiss, no smile, no explanation. I exhaled when he disappeared. Not because I was happy he was home, but because he wasn't speaking. Not yet. Honestly, I didn't care where he had been, didn't care who he'd been with, didn't care what lies he'd tell later. When he was gone, I could breathe. The girls could breathe. The whole house felt lighter when Daniel wasn't there. The tension lifted. The walls didn't feel so close. The girls laughed louder. We played music while we cleaned. Old gospel songs, R&B classics, sometimes silly dance songs Peyton loved. Peyton would dance through the kitchen in her socks. Mia would smile and sing softly while folding towels. We'd play board games in the family room, laugh until our stomachs hurt, eat popcorn in pajamas. For a few precious hours, we felt normal, safe, free. Those were the moments I cherished, the moments when the house felt like a home, not a battlefield, not a prison, just me and my girls, holding on to joy wherever we could find it. But the second Daniel came home, everything changed. And as I stood there plating his breakfast, listening to the shower run upstairs, I whispered a prayer under my breath. Lord, let today be peaceful. Because in our house, peace was never guaranteed. The truth surfaces. I still replay that weekend in my mind, over and over, wondering if I should have listened to the feeling in my spirit. That quiet warning, the one I tried to ignore. The women's retreat had been planned for months. A Christian women's retreat in Houston. TX, 3 days of worship, prayer, healing, encouragement. The women from church were excited, and as First Lady, they were counting on me. I was scheduled to lead small groups, moderate panel discussions, open Saturday morning prayer, smile, encourage, inspire. That Friday afternoon, I packed my bag. I kissed Mia and Peyton goodbye. Mia clung to me a little longer than usual, her arms wrapped tightly around my waist, her face buried against my stomach. "Mommy, do you have to go?" Her voice was small, fragile. I brushed her hair back. "It's only for the weekend, baby." I smiled softly. "I'll be back before you know it." Peyton tried to be brave. She forced a smile. But I saw it in her eyes, too. Fear. Daniel stood in the kitchen scrolling on his phone, barely paying attention. I looked at him. "You've got the girls?" He nodded without looking up. "They'll be fine." Something in me hesitated. A feeling, a warning, but I ignored it. I left, and I've regretted it ever since. The house was quiet for a while after I left. The girls tried to stay out of Daniel's way. They played together in the living room, whispering, watching cartoons, trying to keep the peace. Then it happened. An accident. Just a glass. Peyton bumped the coffee table. The glass tipped over, shattered across the floor. The sound echoed through the house. Daniel snapped. His footsteps thundered down the hallway. "What did you do?" The girls froze. Peyton burst into tears. Mia stepped in front of her little sister. "It was an accident." Before she could finish, Daniel grabbed his belt. The fear in their eyes must have been unbearable. The kind of fear children should never know. The kind of fear that leaves scars long after bruises fade. Their cries filled the house. Then silence. He dragged them to their rooms, ordered them not to come out. No dinner, no comfort, no apology, only punishment. Hours passed. The girls sat in their rooms hungry, crying quietly, holding each other through the wall, listening for his footsteps. That night, Daniel left, again, and didn't return. When I called to check on them, Daniel answered. His voice was cold. "They're fine." I asked to speak to the girls. "No." His voice hardened. "Stop calling. You'll see them when you get back." Then he hung up. My stomach dropped. I barely slept. The whole weekend I felt distracted, restless. The women praised my leadership, told me how strong I was, how graceful, how blessed, and all I could think about was home. I returned Sunday morning. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I dropped my bag by the door. "Mia? Peyton?" They came slowly down the stairs, and when I saw their faces, my world stopped. Mia's eyes were swollen from crying. Peyton's lip trembled. There were bruises, marks, fear written all over them. This was not discipline. This was abuse. My knees nearly buckled. I pulled them into my arms, and they clung to me like they were drowning. I held them and cried, apologized over and over. I should have protected them. I should have listened. I should have stayed. And in that moment, I knew. Something had to change. Daniel Reed, my husband, the beloved pastor, had become a monster. Then the memories started lining up. Mia's silence, her withdrawn spirit, how she jumped at loud noises, how she flinched when Daniel raised his hand too fast, how she shrank when he entered a room, how she avoided eye contact, how she seemed older than 12, like childhood had already been stolen from her. That night, after Peyton finally fell asleep, Mia came into my room. She stood in the doorway shaking. "Mommy!" I sat up immediately. "What is it, baby?" She started crying before she could speak. My heart broke instantly. She crawled into my bed, trembling. Then, through tears, she told me, in broken pieces, in whispers. She told me Daddy had been coming into her room some nights. She told me he touched her in ways no father ever should. She told me he said not to tell, said bad things would happen if she did. I couldn't breathe. The room spun. I felt sick. My baby, my sweet girl, had been carrying this alone. I held her and cried until I thought my chest would cave in. I kissed her face, wiped her tears, and whispered over and over, "This is not your fault. You did nothing wrong. I'm so sorry. I promise you, it will never happen again." And for the first time in a long time, I stopped being afraid of Daniel, because fear was replaced by something stronger. A mother's rage, a mother's protection. That night, I packed bags. I woke Peyton. I took both girls and drove to my sister's house in Pflugerville. She opened the door, and one look at our faces told her everything. She didn't ask questions. She just let us in. That night, I prayed harder than I ever had in my life. I fell to my knees beside the bed, the girls asleep beside me, and I begged God, "Please rescue us. Give me strength. Give me wisdom. Help me protect my babies. Help me make the right decisions." I decided the next morning I would call the police. I didn't know then, while I was praying for rescue, Daniel's world was already beginning to collapse, and back at Greater Ebenezer, the storm had already started. The truth surfaces. There were moments, brief moments, when Daniel Reed barely recognized the man staring back at him. He stood in front of the mirror in his locked office, the same office no one else was allowed to enter, the same office where secrets lived, the same office where sermons were written and sins were hidden. The room was dim. Only the desk lamp burned in the corner. Shadows stretched across the walls. Daniel leaned closer to the mirror, and for a second, he froze. His eyes. They were different now. Dark, hollow, lifeless, as if whatever soul once lived inside him was slipping away. The bright-eyed young preacher who once spoke about righteousness looked gone. His face was thinner, his skin dull. Dark circles rested beneath bloodshot eyes. His jaw twitched, his hands trembled. He ran a shaky hand over his face. Sweat clung to his forehead, his breathing uneven. At first, the powder had felt like a miracle. It made him feel alive, sharp, focused, powerful. He could preach harder, work longer, sleep less. He convinced himself it helped him. He'd write sermons in one night, handle meetings, charm donors, please women, balance lies, run the church, rule his home. He felt unstoppable, invincible, like nothing and no one could touch him. The drug became his secret weapon, his fuel, his false god. But over time, the miracle turned into a monster. The same amount no longer worked, so he took more, then more, and more. The highs got shorter, the crashes got harder. His thoughts became louder, faster, darker. His body demanded it now. His mind depended on it. Without it, he shook, sweated, snapped. His rage became instant, violent, uncontrollable. His thoughts became paranoid. Everyone was suspicious. Everyone was against him. Angela asking questions? Disrespect? Church board reviewing finances? Betrayal? The girls whispering in the hallway? Talking about him? Staff members glancing at each other? Plotting? Keisha calling too much? Pressure. Everything felt like an attack. The drugs that once made him feel strong now made him feel hunted, confused, cornered. Even his own reflection felt threatening. He stared into the mirror, eyes wild, nostrils flaring. His lips trembled. And in that moment, he saw it. Not the pastor, not the husband, not the father, but something darker. A man consumed by greed, consumed by lust, consumed by anger, consumed by addiction, consumed by sin. The image in the mirror looked like a shell, a body occupied by darkness. He whispered to himself, "What have I become?" His voice cracked. For one brief second, conviction stirred. The faintest whisper of guilt, a flicker of the man he used to be. The young preacher who loved God, the husband who once adored his wife, the father who once prayed over his daughters. But then, just as quickly, he crushed it. He straightened his shoulders, wiped his nose, adjusted his tie, and spoke the lie he had repeated so many times. It had become his anthem. "I'm just a man." He said it again, louder. "I'm just a man." As if the words erased the affairs, the stealing, the violence, the abuse, the lies. As if weakness excused wickedness. As if temptation justified destruction. As if being just a man explained becoming a monster. He slammed his fist against the counter, breathing hard, then reached for another line, another hit, another escape, another layer between him and reality. And as he inhaled, the man in the mirror disappeared again, replaced by the version of Daniel Reed. that Satan no longer had to chase, because Daniel was already running toward him. Eventually, secrets have a way of colliding with reality. Concerns about church finances triggered a review. Questions led to deeper questions, and soon, the carefully built image Daniel had cultivated began to unravel. The deacons were already aware of the church's finances. Daniel used his pastoral role to control conversations and silence concerns. He would frame his authority as spiritual rather than organizational. He created a culture where people felt uncomfortable questioning him. He would use the church's resources as his personal account. He would cut the deacons off if they questioned his authority. Daniel handled more decisions personally, insisting it was for efficiency. This Sunday morning, Keisha had a plan to take her man. She had started sharing lines of coke with Daniel. She wanted to share everything with him. He started disappearing on weekends. She was tired of asking Daniel to leave Angela. They had been together almost a year, and he had not made a move to leave. Well, she was tired of it. She had stood by crying and pleading for him to put her first. She devoted her life to Daniel. Now was the time for him to keep his promise. It was time for Daniel to leave Angela. It was time for her to take her rightful place as Daniel's wife and first lady of the church. She had something planned for all of them. Angela would have no choice but to leave Daniel when she finished. He would be with her one way or another. She would make sure everyone knew Daniel was in love with her, and only her. Daniel had another weekend binge full of drugs and sex on Runberg, but he had to deliver a sermon that Sunday morning. No worries, he could still deliver the message. Service started on time. The choir with their angelic voices did not disappoint. The praise dancers were great. Deacon Otis prayed, and everyone felt it. Daniel was sweating profusely. His nose would not stop running, and he was noticeable jittery. The congregation noticed too. As Daniel opened his mouth to deliver his message, the doors of the church flew open so hard, everyone turned to see who caused the disturbance. Keisha. The sanctuary was packed. Sunday morning at Greater Ebenezer CME was standing room only. The choir had just finished singing. Hands were lifted. People were shouting praises. The organ played softly in the background as Daniel Reed stepped behind the pulpit. Sharp suit, perfect smile, Bible in hand. To the congregation, he looked like the same powerful pastor they had always known. But beneath the polished image, his world was already crumbling. Daniel adjusted the microphone. "Church," he said smoothly. "God has given me a word this morning." The back doors flew open. The loud bang echoed through the sanctuary. Heads turned instantly. Gasps filled the room. Keisha Monroe stood in the doorway, her hair wild. Mascara streaked down her face, her heels uneven as she staggered forward. In one hand, a gun. Screams erupted. Mothers grabbed their children. Ushers ducked. Deacons rushed toward the aisle. Security moved quickly. "Ma'am, stop right there!" one guard shouted. But Keisha lifted the weapon and waved it wildly. "Everybody back up!" she screamed. "Back up before somebody gets hurt!" The room froze. Even the choir stood silent. Daniel's face drained of color. His Bible slipped slightly in his trembling hands. Keisha laughed, a broken, angry laugh. "Well, look at you, Daniel." She staggered farther down the aisle. "Standing up there like you're so holy." Her voice cracked as she pointed at him. "Tell them, Daniel. Tell them who I am." The church fell silent. People looked from Keisha to Daniel. Keisha's eyes burned with rage. "Tell them about your new First Lady!" A collective gasp moved through the sanctuary. Daniel stepped back from the microphone. "Keisha, calm down." She laughed harder. "Calm down?" Her voice rose louder. "Tell them how you lied to me. Tell them how you promised me a life." She pointed around the sanctuary. "Tell them about the money. Tell them where the church money's been going." Murmurs spread through the pews. People started whispering. Deacons exchanged worried glances. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came. Keisha moved closer to the stage. "You told me she was nothing," she screamed. "You said Angela didn't understand you. You said she stressed you out." She looked toward the front pews. Her eyes scanned wildly. "Where is she? Where's your wife?" People turned. The church erupted into chaos. Some members ran, others prayed. Some stood in disbelief. Daniel rushed forward. Keisha, stop! She spun back toward him. No, you stop! Stop lying! Stop pretending! Stop preaching! Her hand shook violently. Tears streamed down her face. She was unraveling right there in front of everyone. In her rage, she didn't notice the security guard circling behind her. He moved carefully, slowly, timing every step. Then, he lunged. He grabbed her arm. The gun fired. Bang! The entire church screamed. People dropped to the floor. Children cried. The sound echoed through the sanctuary. For one terrifying second, nobody moved. Then, it became clear. No one was hit. The bullet had gone harmlessly into the ceiling. Security wrestled Keisha to the ground. She kicked, screamed, cried, still shouting Daniel's name, still cursing Angela, still exposing secrets. Daniel stood frozen behind the pulpit, his church, his image, his lies, all collapsing in real time. Sirens sounded outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the stained glass windows. Police stormed inside moments later. Keisha was handcuffed and dragged out screaming, "I loved you, Daniel! I made you! Tell them the truth!" The sanctuary was left in stunned silence. Daniel stood alone, at the podium, in front of his shattered congregation, and for the first time in his life, Pastor Daniel Reed had no sermon. What Daniel didn't know, the deacons were onto him. They had been watching him for months. The senior deacon, Otis Jones, did more than notice. He had been tracking Daniel's movements. The investigation revealed serious misconduct and betrayals of trust, both financial and personal. Otis followed the money. He knew about the weekends on Runberg. He knew Daniel had taken Keisha on several vacations to Dubai, Bali, Italy, and the Greek islands. Otis traced the money to gifts and items he bought her, hotels and drugs, totaling just over $100,000. Otis had contacted the police weeks ago. With the evidence Otis gathered, it did not take the detectives long to obtain a warrant for Daniel's arrest. The investigator had already planned to arrest Daniel during his sermon. They handcuffed Daniel and took him to jail. The scandal at Greater Ebenezer had already shaken the city. But what investigators uncovered next would destroy whatever was left of Daniel Reed's image. Accounts were frozen, records were seized, and law enforcement obtained warrants to search Daniel's office, home, and electronic devices. The media swarmed the church parking lot. News vans lined the streets. Every local station carried the story. People wanted answers. At first, some members defended him. There has to be some misunderstanding. Pastor Reed would never do this. But as evidence surfaced, those voices grew quieter. Investigators entered Daniel's home office. It looked exactly how people would expect a pastor's office to look. Mahogany desk, leather chair, shelves lined with Bibles and theology books, family photos, awards, sermon notes, a polished image. But hidden beneath that image was another life. Inside locked drawers, investigators found documents that didn't match church records, bank statements, wire transfers, receipts, cash withdrawals. As forensic accountants dug deeper, a pattern emerged. For years, Daniel had been quietly funneling money from the church, small amounts at first, amounts unlikely to raise suspicion, then larger transfers, payments hidden under ministry expenses, outreach funds rerouted, building fund money missing, luxury purchases disguised as church operations, hotel charges, travel, gifts, private accounts. The betrayal was staggering. Church members had sacrificed. Single mothers tithed faithfully. Elderly members gave from fixed incomes. Families donated believing they were funding ministry. And all along, Daniel had been stealing from the very people who trusted him. But that wasn't all. When investigators searched Daniel's laptop and phone, they found evidence of an even darker secret. Hidden folders, encrypted files, private browsing histories, illegal and deeply disturbing material. The kind of material that turned the case from financial fraud into something much worse. The detectives' faces changed as they reviewed it. The room grew heavier. My daughters cried as they revealed the pain they had been carrying in silence to the police. The fear, the confusion, the shame that never belonged to them. I held them as they broke. And in that moment, I stopped being just a wife betrayed. I became a mother ready to fight. We told them everything. Everything I suspected. Everything I remembered. The detectives listened carefully. The investigation widened immediately. When I learned what they found, I felt physically sick. Pictures of underage girls on his laptop. My knees nearly gave out. It all hit me at once. The abuse of my girls and other little girls. I had already been trying to survive the humiliation of his affair, the collapse of the church, the financial betrayal. But this was something else. Something darker. Something I never wanted to imagine. Pieces of my daughter's silence began to make sense. The fear in their eyes, the distance, the nightmares. The moments they pulled away when he entered the room. Things I had ignored. Things I had explained away. Things I would never forgive myself for missing. That night, I sat down with Mia and Peyton. For the first time, I asked the questions. And when the truth came out, my world shattered all over again. And the case against Daniel Reed changed forever. Charges multiplied, financial crimes, fraud, abuse-related charges, possession of illegal material, and additional counts as more evidence surfaced. The community was stunned. The church members couldn't believe it. People who once shouted amen at his sermons now sat in disbelief watching his mugshot on television. The headlines were relentless. Pastor accused of financial fraud. Megachurch leader arrested. Abuse allegations surface. Hidden double life exposed. His face was everywhere. The same face that once smiled from church flyers and billboards now stared back from news reports and courtroom sketches. For me and the girls, the pain was unbearable. The man we trusted most, the man who prayed over us, the man who tucked our daughters into bed, was now at the center of unimaginable evil. Our home no longer felt safe. Our memories no longer felt pure. Even our faith felt shaken. But through the devastation, one thing became clear. Daniel Reed was finally going to face justice. He received 62 years in prison, and this time, there would be no pulpit to hide behind. It was a fall not just from position, but from identity. Act 7. Rising into Purpose. Our home, once filled with tension, became a place of honesty and support. I painted our new, modest 3-bedroom house located on the east side of Austin in beautiful colors. We loved walking in and seeing the vibrant colors. It was clean and neat, but not sterile. We enjoyed having friends over, spending time in our backyard and just being together. We didn't just endure, we grew. Picking up the pieces. While headlines focused on Daniel's downfall, a quieter story was unfolding. I made one decision that would shape the rest of our lives. I chose healing. Therapy became a lifeline, a place where grief, anger, and confusion could be spoken aloud safely. The girls learned something powerful, that what happened to them did not define who they would become. Healing was not linear. There were hard days, moments of doubt, waves of emotion that felt overwhelming. But slowly, strength replaced shock. The pain never fully disappeared, but it no longer controlled our story. I started a support organization for families rebuilding after betrayal, creating safe spaces that I once wished existed. The foundation also helped the mothers of Daniel's 2 children. I welcomed Daniel's son and daughter into our family. They are babies and are part of Mia and Peyton. Years later, years passed, and the family's story began to shift from survival to growth. Mia pursued a career in psychology, determined to help others heal. Peyton became an advocate and public speaker, sharing messages of resilience. Their bond as a family grew stronger than it had ever been. They celebrated milestones, laughed again, and built a future rooted in truth. Keisha was committed to a mental institution for a few months. After withdrawals and therapy, she felt stronger and was discharged. She moved back home to Detroit, where her family is. She felt the support from her family. They welcomed her back home. Time has a way of softening wounds, even when it doesn't erase them. Meanwhile, Daniel faced the consequences of his actions. A reminder that accountability is an essential part of justice. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing and hit the like button. Please leave a comment. If you know someone, or if you've gone through something like this, let me know in the comments. Let's talk about it. Let me know where you're watching from. Sometimes one word will connect us. Remember, you are not alone, and I love you.